everyone, welcome back. This is going to be a video about how I make animated emotes. Okay, so let's get started. Just choose a new file, make sure it's on animated option and do any settings you want to do. I usually go for 2000 per 2000 since it's an emote and it needs to be a square format, and around 200 per 200 pixel for the blank space. So the small rectangular you have on the screen, that is actually going to be the camera. What's outside of it, it's going to be cropped. Okay, so I made a new animated layer and just start sketching out how I would like it to be. And after that, I just duplicate the same layer, make a new layer in the animated timeline, and make sure you rename it to be the same number as you have on the layers on the right side of the screen. So for this type of animation, I found that around 3 to 4 layers are more than enough. So now you can just play around with the frames and actually go on each and every frame and do some edits if you want to. So to simplify the process, I just just duplicate the same sketch I already did and just select the head and move it a bit up and a bit down. On frame number 3, I actually thought it would be cute if the character has a blink, so I did that. Okay, so on the next part, I made another folder, animated folder, and I am going to separate all the elements. The sketch is on low opacity and I'm just gonna follow it. I use the symmetrical ruler just because the character is symmetrical, but if it's not, then you have to draw it separately. But if you can use the tool, I mean, why not? At this point, I was a bit frustrated with the eraser because it didn't work how I would like it to be. So after testing out a few settings, I actually decided to duplicate the Gpen, the brush Gpen that I had, and just change the mode to make it an eraser. Sometimes if you're using the symmetrical ruler, the eraser or the pen will not draw on both sides. So that was the case this time. The eraser wouldn't draw the symmetrical things. So it was just easier to take the brush and just change the blending mode and made it an eraser. So now I have the Gpen both as an pen and as an eraser. Again, these are the default settings on Clip Studio Paint and the default brushes, so you might just need to make small edits so that you have a brush that works in your favor. Again, this depends on the tablet, on the canvas size, on a lot of things. So don't get too worried if a brush doesn't work how you wanted. Maybe you just need to make a few small edits. I believe a brush needs to be comfortable to use, so if you're struggling a bit, just maybe look at settings. And if that doesn't work, just duplicate a brush that you like and just switch up those settings. Okay, so I'm almost done with the head. I made the head line art and the eyes on the same layer. And I'm not too worried about coloring right now, that will come a bit later. So now I'm following the settings I did to the sketch animation. And I duplicate the same layer and just move it around with the arrows. I think I moved them around. And on frame number 3, since I want to make the character blink, I just delete unwanted line art and just make new ones. Frame number 4 is actually a duplicate of frame number 2, so whatever you're drawing on frame number 2 will appear on frame number 4. And this way you are going to have a loop of an animation. You can also think of number 1 as being the first keyframe animation and number 3 being the ending keyframe animation, and also number 2 being the in-between animation. Of course, if you want a smoother animation, you can add more keyframes in between, but it's an emote and it's gonna be small usually, so I think this is enough. But you can play around, see how you like to, discover your own workflow. So I'm moving on. I made another animation folder and another layer, and I'm actually just making another sketch for the hands and the object. So basically what I'm doing is thinking in layers, what's in front of the camera, what's the second layer, and what's underneath it. So this way I made the hands and the burger. to be in front of the camera. Underneath it is going to be the character. And if I made all of this separate on different animation layer, it's going to be easier to make edits or changes or you know, just keep track of whatever you're doing. Especially since this layer, this animation layer with the hands and the burgers, I don't want it to move, so I actually just need to draw it once and that's all. So I'm just detailing the lines a bit. Make sure you don't waste too much time on details because again it is going to be small. You can actually draw on a lower pixel size canvas, so that's really up to you. Again, I'm comfortable at this size, so I'm going to use it like this. And it's also good in case I actually want to make or save the animation in a larger format. I don't really need to rescale the canvas to make it larger. Okay, and here I'm just testing out both animation folders, and I do like the result, so I'm actually moving on to the last part. After I edit the hands a bit because they didn't look quite right or how I would like them to be. So just you can spend as much or as little time as you want on this. There's also no rush, so I think if you need to change something or edit, it's better to do it now, because after you color it, it might be a bit complicated. It's not impossible, it might just take a bit more time and, you know, not be worth it. So fix anything you want to, and you know, don't let them pile up till the end, because sometimes you won't see mistakes that you do until the very end, so might as well just avoid as many as possible. Okay, and when I like it, I actually duplicate the layer again, make it on the second frame, make sure to rename the frame to be similar to the layer, otherwise it will not read. It will not appear in the timeline. You will just have an empty canvas. Okay, and just play around until you're happy with the animation, the frames. I think you noticed by now, but I don't actually make animation on each and every frame. So we have 9 frames and 3 to 4 images. So each image occupies around 2 or 3 frames. You can actually make animation 1 frame to the second frame to the third frame, but it's going to move very, very fast. So if you want it just a bit slower, you can actually make, as I did, 1 drawing on 2 frames or 3 frames if you want it just a bit longer. Again, this comes with preferences and I guess how you want the final animation to look like. At this point I forgot to add eyebrows, so I actually made a new animation layer for the eyebrows. Now it's not necessarily, I could have just worked on it on the head animation, but that will mean to re-edit whatever I have done up until now, so in this case it was just easier to make a new folder. And as always, just zoom out to check if everything is correctly in place and it has visibility. Again, it's an emote, so it's going to be tiny. And if it doesn't have visibility, you can just make the line a bit heavier if you want to. On this part, I just made the hair sketch. And I just know I want the hair to bounce up a bit when it's on frame number 3. So if you can't think ahead just a bit, just keep in mind what kind of animation you want to continue doing. This is just going to make your process a bit easier. So I'm playing around with the sketch and I'm moving it up and down to match the head movement. And after I think it looks fine, it fits, I'm actually going to go back to frame number 2 and 3. I mean layer, not frame. And just make the tips of the hair move a bit. Again, there's no need to add too much animation here, unless you want to. If you want to move the hair to have more bounce, sure, you can go ahead and test out and see if you like it. But in my case I just wanted the hair tips to move a bit. And I wasn't sure if I want them to move left or right, so I actually tried a few versions. And in the end I actually moved them a bit less. So again, just if you're doing this type of animation emote, just have fun with it. You will learn along the way, so no need to worry too much, as everything is a learning process, so one step at a time, you'll get there. Okay, and I made a new animation folder again and just started with the line art on the hair, and I added a few more hair strains. And now the top part of the hair is not symmetrical, so I had to draw them both left and right. However, I do have two hair strains that are symmetrical, so if that's the case, you can actually drag and drop the symmetrical ruler on the layer you're working on, make the symmetry, and just delete the symmetry ruler afterwards and just continue working on an empty canvas without the symmetry tool activated. Or you can just make a new animation folder and just do the symmetry part differently if you want to. But there's no need. If you can have shortcuts like this, why not use them? So again, I dragged and dropped the symmetry ruler on this layer, and when I'm done with it, I will actually delete it. Just the ruler, not the canvas. And just go around and repair every possible mistake you have with the symmetry ruler activated, or vice versa. And here I'm just closing in the gaps, just so I can have an easier time when I'm going to color it. And when I'm done, I again duplicate the layer, rename it, add it to the keyframe, and edit number 2 and number 3. And you can do this process as many times as you want, on many layers as you want. But it's good to think a bit ahead and, don't overdo it if it's not necessarily. For example, there was no need to make every hair strain on different animation layer. Well, not in this case anyway, in this type of animation. But there are also other workflows that you can use. I will show in the next video. Okay, and for the edits on number 2 and number 3, I'm just moving the hair tips just a bit. I'm not doing too much edits for now, so it's going to be a soft sway movement of the hair. And this video actually took around 3 hours, so I had to speed it up. I hope it's not going too fast and you're able to see what I'm doing. And here, as I worked on number 3, on the drawing on the number 3, I actually noticed I had to redraw the hair a bit because it was out of sync from the canvas. Okay, and just activate the onion skin if you don't really know where to place the lines, the line art. So the onion skin will actually show you the frame before and the frame after. So in blue color is the frame before, and in green color is the frame after. So just draw somewhere around the middle. In this case, on frame number 2. I didn't quite use the onion skin when I was working on frame number 3 because I didn't really need to. But if you want to, you can just keep the onion skin activated all the time if you think it's going to be helpful. So I'm doing one more test now, just checking on zoom in, zoom out, and also with the cropped camera, and making sure it's readable in each and every size, and that the animation is going as smooth as it can. And when I'm happy with it, I actually go around and rename all the animation layers. And at this point I decided that it might be a good idea just to make a body as well, so I would not have a floating head with a burger. However, this will more or less be covered by other elements, so I don't need to spend too much time on it. I also won't need to move it around I mean, you can if you want to, I just didn't. So yeah, the line art is done, the animation is working smoothly. So now I'm just going to go and make the final details. So this is just the coloring. And for the coloring process, I actually prefer to make a new animated folder that I will rename it just the object and the colors. And I will go around with the wand tool or the selection tool and just select each color I want to make and just work directly. So this way I'm going to have the line art separate from the color file in case I need to change the colors or maybe change the line art color. And since I have this type of animation, you can add as many details or as few details as you want to. Again, it's not quite frame by frame animation since I just did one object and just duplicated and moved the frame around. So again, this is just one way to work with it. You can try other ways as well. Again, I'm using the selection tool and just add details. Now, because I worked like this, I can add many details to the eyes if I want to. And since I think they're a main focus for these animations, I'm going to spend a bit more time on it. For the brushes, I'm only using the Gpen and a bit of an airbrush, so no, not too many. You can try out others if you want to, just remember to reuse them. Otherwise you might have a GIF that's not I guess going smooth, but I guess that's a style as well. So I would say play around, because if something goes wrong you can always, you know, keep having the line art layer and the color layer separately, so you can't really break anything. Okay, so after I'm done, I'm just duplicating the color layer again and just add more details or delete details if I need to. Like in this case, on the number 3, I had a blink, so I wanted to delete the eyes and just redo the blush a bit. So it's just easier to select everything and just color pick everything. Again, we are going to have an object, so no need to spend too much time, especially if we won't see certain things. That's why I actually didn't draw them out, because it will just be covered by another object, so I would have just maybe wasted time drawing it. But if I have drawn it, maybe I would have placed the animation a bit different so that you can actually see the mouth opening and closing. Okay, at this point I realized I can actually move the timeline. So I moved it on the side, and just because I have only, well, nine frames, around 3 to 4 drawings for each. And if it's on vertical, it would be easier to see what I'm doing and just click on them if I need to. And then moving on and just coloring the burger, the same. I made a new animation folder and just made colors on it. Select every part I need to. So for example, I just selected the buns and I'm placing colors, and if I need to just color adjust it, and if I don't want the symmetry, just delete the symmetry ruler, make the dot or any details without the symmetry if you want to, and if you want the symmetry ruler again, just drag and drop it. It's an easier way to work with. I mean, I found it easier. If you have any other preferences, you can just leave them in the comments. Okay, so a bit more details. Again, no need to over detail anything. So I'm actually limiting myself to a base color, a shadow, and a highlight for each and every object. Plus minus. For example, I didn't add a highlight on the skin texture, just because I didn't feel like it needed to have one. So, but on the burger, I felt like it needed maybe a bit more detail. You can use the wand or the selection tool either if you're on the Lineart layer and just choose in between the lines, or the color layer. So I actually play around with them. Most of the time I do the selection on the Lineart layer just because it's easier and it's already clean. We have clean lines. But sometimes it was just faster to select the color I already added. Just make sure if you're using the airbrush and the selection tool, you might not get the full color just because the airbrush has a fine gradient, so the wand tool will not pick it, might not pick it properly. Okay, so for the last part I'm coloring the hair, just the same things. I noticed I'm missing a few hair strands, including the hair underneath it. So instead of doing the line art again, I just continue adding color. If you look at the small rectangular that is going to be the camera, most of it's going to be cropped, so there's no need to spend time on it. I've also made a new layer underneath everything just to add the hair underneath. Again, this doesn't have line art, but you won't be able to see it. Okay, so I'm adding the base colors, a bit of highlight and a bit of shadow. I'm working on a locked layer, locked transparent pixel layer, because as far as I've noticed, I can't actually use the clip part for the layers, probably because this is an animation. So because I can't clip anything to the layer, it's an animation, so I will have to use the lock transparent layers. So I'm almost done, just refining a bit the details. Again, you can add as many details or as few as you want to, just keep in mind maybe the next step and what parts are going to move. So because of that, I'm actually maybe focusing on detailing stuff that are not moving, like the top of the head, because the hair tips are going to move. And if we add too many details there, then we're going to have to do it all over again. And here I noticed I'm missing a hair strain. So while I'm here, I'm going to actually repair it. So I added a few extra color. I didn't add the extra line art because I didn't feel like it needed, especially since it was a dark color. So I'm going again with the selection tool. I'm on color actually, and just add a bit of gradient with the airbrush. Again, keep in mind you are going to move the hair tips, so maybe don't add details there, or not too many details there, because you're going to have to redraw them again for the rest of the layers or frames. Okay, so I'm duplicating it again for number 2 and number 3, and I'm just going around and just repair everything. Because the rest of the layer were distracting, I actually hide them, or how do you call them, make them invisible. And I'm just going around and repairing everything I have on the color layer. So that means erasing parts of it and adding more color. So it's a bit tedious, but it was faster. And when I know where I need to, I actually use the select tool and the bucket to fill up the colors faster. And in places where I actually have gradient, I'm going to select it and just color pick everything and just add a bit of airbrush. It's discreet, but it's getting the job done. So you can see it here. The airbrush is helpful to smooth things out. So just use a bit of airbrush and just color pick the closest colors. So it's a fast edit. You can probably do it very fast and with being less noticeable, I think. And again, I'm almost done, and this is the last frame, the number 3 drawing. So we're getting close to the end. Again, color pick everything and just use a bit of airbrush and the selection tool if you need to. And again, if you're unsure about where to put the colors, you can just use the onion skin or just go back and forth between frames. That also works. And when you think you're done, just test it out and see if you like it. So I think everything kinda works as I would expect it. But I felt it was missing something, so I decided to add a bit of spark. So I took the symmetry tool again, change it to 4 points, and use the curve line. And just duplicate it as many times as you want. Just keep in mind, work outside the animation frame. So these are just new layers made outside of the animation frames. And this way I can merge them, edit them, clip them, and add any other effects I would need to. And after I'm done, like I like the look, I'm going to merge every layer and just make a new animation layer and drag and drop it there. And since I just want a spark, like some kind of blink, I will only add 2 frames, so it's just going to be 1 and 2. Drawings on I think frame number 1 and frame number 4. Again, I'm testing here if I actually want them to blink on each and every layer, and I didn't quite like the effect. I tried on 2 by 2 frames and I think that worked better. So again, this is just about playing around, because you can't really break anything, so just test out and see how you like them. Now there were much edit I did. It was just drawing number 1, duplicated drawing number 2, and I just scaled them up or down. So that was really all I did for this blinking effect. I actually deleted some of them because I felt like there were too many. And I think I also deleted frames, so there's just 2 now. It's 1 larger and 1 smaller, and that's about it. And to export everything, you go to File, Export Animation, and export GIF or GIF. And you might have noticed we're missing some frames in the final GIF version, and that's because the timeline has a different frame that the export animation GIF had. So make sure both of them have the same number. So to check that, you go to Animation, Timeline, and change frame settings. You remember that number, and when you go to export the GIF again, you change that number to be the same. And that was all. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye!